So, our first guest today is Bridget Coleman with PBOT. Bridget, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. Love joining Venture and seeing all of these business owners and giving everyone an update on where things are at. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen because I have a slide deck to go through. Okay, did that load?
Yep, looks good.
Perfect. So I'm talking, as Jacob mentioned, about our Healthy Businesses program today. This program was created as an emergency response program for COVID-19, and it has allowed businesses to utilize right-of-way spaces, sidewalk, parking, street space to create more room for business, for customers to spread out, to allow for physical distancing, and create some safe spacing for customers and employees alike. The program has been pretty popular and successful since it started in May of 2020. Right now, we are in a renewal cycle for permits. So existing permits are set to expire at the end of October 31st. And renewals are open for folks to apply. The new permits will be valid through June 30th of 2022. We have been really fortunate. Our council members approved funding, American Relief funding, for this program, which has allowed us to continue to subsidize the permit costs. So the permits will still be free through June 30th of 2022. Again, renewals are open, but if you haven't had one of these permits before, you can also apply for a new permit for your business if you're interested in using any of those right-of-way spaces. We have an online application that's really easy to fill out. It takes about 5 minutes. And then there's some follow-up work if you have notification requirements. That's usually for street spaces or spaces that want to encroach on neighbors' adjacent property. Or if getting insurance documents in, but our team works hand in hand with these businesses to make sure that you can get your permitted space and you know what's required for those. So please, if you have an existing permit, they won't renew automatically. So make sure that you get that renewal form filled out. I'll share a link in the chat after I'm done presenting so you can get directly to that. Or if you're a new business, go ahead and apply, early since it's such a quick application process, and then we'll work with you to get that permit done. Looking back at the permit program, we have permitted over 1,000 healthy business permits, which is a lot of businesses in the city taking advantage of this. There have been 50 full street plazas, so full street closure, 181 pickup drop-off zones. And again, these have all been free of charge since the program started in 2020. Additionally, we've been able to provide over $80,000 in free traffic control devices for Black, Indigenous, and person of color-owned businesses. We delivered 20 free outdoor dining plaza kits. Those were valued at $2,000 a piece for businesses, $10,000 worth of free 5-minute pickup drop-off signs. Through our Travel Oregon grant, which was a little over $47,000, we did wayfinding and placemaking, and then part of that was also 132,000 square feet of painted right-of-way surface, so street painting work, which is about 3 acres of space, which is great. Our 5-minute pickup drop-off zones are set to expire. They're valid through December 31st of 2021. These are really great for businesses that are doing to-go food, or if you're looking at retail for the winter holiday season and you want to have a quick pickup drop-off space for online orders. They're also great for any business that is looking at that fast turnover of customers. PBOT has been piloting a more permanent program, which is the Fast Stop. You see the photo in the bottom left of the purple sign with the bunny on it. That was kind of born out of this 5-minute pickup drop-off zone that's been popular. And we should see kind of where that's going. We'll be releasing more information soon on the 5-minute pickup drop-off zones, whether there's a renewal or what that'll look like. We'll be sending out an email to anyone who's applied here shortly. New for winter or for healthy businesses going forward. Leaf day, it's about that time of year. All the leaves are falling from the trees, and the city does have a leaf pickup program. So we ask that permit holders clear the leaves from their spaces around any tents, canopies, structures that you have, and either dispose of them yourself if you're not in a leaf zone, or place them in an appropriate pickup location. I'll also share a link to the online map so you can see if your business is within one of those leaf pickup areas, and make sure that you have that ready to go. We also checked in with the fire marshal's office. As things have been settling down a little bit, we've obviously had a very, very busy fire season in 2021, lots of fires. And the fire marshal's office is really interested in making sure that the full street healthy business closures have their required 11-foot unobstructed lanes. They're going to be issuing $500 on the spot citations for anyone who doesn't have that 11-foot space cleared. These spaces, when you're getting a full street permit, we include that on your traffic control plan, and it should be shown on the site plan that we work with you on as well. If your business has a full street closure and you have any questions about that, you can reach out to our PBOT Business Toolkit email. We can make sure that you have the appropriate information that you need. If you have questions about the 11-foot lane, we're happy to work with you and answer those. And then the last kind of big ticket thing that's been coming up is accessibility. This is really important for your customers, but also your community members to be able to navigate around or through healthy business spaces. I shared this graphic in past presentations, but I wanted to bring it up again. You can see some of the requirements for the healthy business spaces. You can see there's a 6-foot minimum width for your clear pedestrian zone on the sidewalk. So you need to make sure you have that 6-foot width. No tent legs, no chairs or tables. A-frames need to be placed out of that space. We really want it to be unobstructed for folks to get through. There's also height requirements for your electrical overhead. If you're running it on the sidewalk, we recommend laying a cord cover over it so that it can be easily traversed. And then there's some setbacks for the parking plazas, the 1-foot clearance from the adjacent travel lane. So from curb out, you have 7 feet of space in a parking space to work with. And then we really want to make sure that folks have that reflectivity on the edges of their parking plazas, or cones with reflectivity there. As we're going into the fall season, there's more dark hours. This is really important to keep cars and people safe. Here I have some great examples that we got from PBOT's accessibility program manager. She's been getting a lot of feedback from community members about locations that have really great accessible healthy business spaces. So you can see some of these have implemented ramps up to their seating. The one in the bottom right has kind of a combo. So there's seating that is up high on a platform, but then they also have additional seating that's accessible on that sidewalk level. So this has been really great. We've had a lot of positive feedback from folks who need accessible spaces, and they're really loving that they can frequent these businesses for shopping or dining. And that, it's important that we have space for everyone. We try to have people avoid things like raised platforms that folks can't get onto, or like having to go upstairs to find a hostess or a server. So just thinking about accessibility when you're designing your space is something that can be really great for all of your neighbors to be able to participate. Maintaining healthy business spaces. So I'm going to talk a little bit later about some of our public survey responses, but one of the things that we have heard about is like maintenance of the spaces as far as cleanliness, but also traffic control. It's interesting, the people of the public notice the traffic control devices. So we want to make sure that all of the businesses who have permits, they have their traffic control and their reflective materials placed according to the permit requirements, or a traffic control plan. If you have a full street closure, you'll have a traffic control plan. If your signs are stolen, damaged, vandalized, they need to be cleaned or replaced to make sure that you're still in compliance for your space. And then any traffic control signage should never be placed in crosswalks or pedestrian through zones. These items do move around, right? They're not fixed. They're heavy, but they can move. So it's great to check on those to make sure they're outside of crosswalks, they're not encroaching on pedestrian through zones, and people can still traverse through those spaces. As I mentioned before, we have been providing resources, traffic control devices, and reflective tape for Black, Indigenous, and person of color owned businesses. We're going to continue to offer that. We generally reach out to businesses when they're going through the application process. If you are Black, Indigenous, or a person of color business owner and you haven't heard from us, or you need replacement items or have questions about this, I'd love for you to email me. I'll go ahead and share my email at the end of the slide as well, and we can make sure that you're getting the resources that you need. So evaluation, I mentioned that we did a public survey. We had one in 2020, and then we did a 2021 evaluation survey as well. We placed these sidewalk decals throughout the city near kind of clusters of healthy business locations. We had over 2,000 participants for our slick text survey, which is a survey just by text message. And then of those people, 464 elected to participate in the longer survey. We had some really cool results, and the full survey results will be released soon, but I wanted to share a couple kind of highlights for our Healthy Business program. So looking beyond 2021, we asked people if they thought these spaces should remain open for business use. Should the right-of-way still be accessible? Should healthy businesses continue to be something that we do in Portland? In 2020, 94% of people said yes. We had a really positive result again in 2021 with 93% of people saying, yeah, we want these to continue. We want to have outdoor dining and retail. And that may be the highest positive response we've had for a Bureau of Transportation program. I'm not 100% sure, but it feels like a really positive response from the public on this work. And then one of the other things that we thought was really interesting, we asked people how they're getting to healthy businesses. What is their mode of transportation? And 63% of people were walking. So this is huge for communities, right? Like people within your communities are getting out and accessing your business more frequently, engaging in the space. And so we see that as something that's a really valuable asset for communities and business districts as well. Lots of bikers too, 11% is great. So plazas, we've had several kind of iterations of plaza space. Some businesses have applied on their own to have a plaza space. This is Stormbreaker on Mississippi's outdoor space in the street. We did have the grant funding that I mentioned earlier from Travel Portland to do wayfinding and placemaking, and there were 20 businesses selected. You can see where they were on the map here. On the slide, we had some selection criteria in place for that. And those locations had additional signage deployed to them, welcoming folks, thanking them for shopping, some tables, umbrellas, those kinds of resources in the area. This work was really well received, and we, are still looking at plazas, like how do we continue to make these spaces vibrant and used by the community. So that was great. Also part of this work was that 3 acres of painting that we did on the roadway surfaces. This is Pride Plaza, Southwest Harvey Milk Street. The street space was surfaced. The businesses that were adjacent did provide the tables and chairs and umbrellas for this site, but we dropped out signage and did a bunch of painting. This is the overhead of the painting work that happened for this particular site. And then in the bottom right, you can see we had these little PBOT stickers that were thanking folks for shopping. So those were some of the materials that were deployed. This is Rainbow Road, Southeast Ankeny. This is another full street closure. They did this beautiful rainbow painting, and then we deployed some umbrellas as well as some planters. This is Northeast Sumner. This is the Dream Street Plaza. This one has been really interesting. BES provided some trees and planters that we were able to deploy here, as well as some lower planters. Dream Street has a cool setup because they do full-time seating dining for the restaurant, where you can see the tables on the backside of this. And then they close the full street for these pop-up markets, like micro enterprise markets, community celebrations. So sometimes this is open for traffic flow, except for the parking plaza, and then the community closes it for these kind of gathering event type closures. This one's in Montevilla, the Montevilla Plaza on Northeast 79th. This has been really cool because they have a stage and some musical components that happen, and then there's tables and seatings and painting for the adjacent properties, the restaurants that are nearby. It's a great community space. And as you can see, like the painting itself adds this kind of extra vibrancy to the space and makes it beautiful for the community. So there are more street plazas than just healthy businesses. This map shows in green PBOT owned plaza spaces. We also have the healthy business spaces mapped. The enhanced plazas, those are the ones that received the grant funding. And then we have activation partnerships with some plazas where we're helping activate the spaces. That's been like an interesting conversation as we look at plazas in the future. Having spaces for community is great, but having an activation component, whether it's farmers markets that are popping up or micro enterprise markets or music, it really adds to the vibrancy of the space and makes it even more of an asset for community. So what are we looking at for the future? We have done healthy business plazas. 2021 was a year of partnership with Prosper Portland to create these public and private plazas that have popped up. And then looking into 2022, how do we expand on that? What does that look like? Are the plazas bigger? Do they have more activation components? Do they need more resources? These are some of the things that we're looking at and considering as we look at the future of plazas and potentially making some of these plazas permanent spaces as well. We're asking ourselves a lot of questions, but also the public a lot of questions about plazas to help shape this work as we go forward. How are people experiencing these spaces? How do they engage with them? What do they like about them? And then, as we continue to enhance the spaces, what should we be considering? And then when we're looking at permanent spaces or exploring future planning options, what do we need to consider? What components of it need to be looked at? One of my colleagues shared this comic. I think it's really great. It says, "This city is going to hell. That used to be a parking lot," right? So there's definitely these mixed opinions on, do we prioritize parking? Do we prioritize public spaces? And we have to balance that as we look at the future of plazas and making some of these spaces permanent. But it's really exciting to look at that. We have received additional American Relief funding to look at plazas and to look at the future of plazas. So a lot of that work's going to be forthcoming, and you'll see probably some more presentations and information coming out of PBOT in regards to that as well. I want to thank everybody for being here today to learn about the program and the program updates. I'd like to thank Venture Portland for having me. As always, it's great to share about healthy businesses and some of PBOT's work. You can always check out safestreetspdx.com to access the Healthy Businesses website information, or contact us if you have questions at PBOT Business Toolkit at portlandoregon.gov. And then we always love people to share on social media. So if you have a healthy business space, share photos, or if you're sharing them, tag us, and we'd love to reshare those and see what's going on, what people are doing out in the community. If you have any specific questions for me, or you're a BIPOC business that's looking for traffic control devices, resources, you can email me directly at bridget.coleman@portlandoregon.gov. Thanks again, everybody, for having me.
Thank you, Bridget. It's so great to hear how popular this program's been and to really see all the participation citywide, businesses kind of taking advantage of those spaces during a tough time. So thanks for PBOT's hard work on that, rolling that out in such a crazy time. And it's really exciting to see that some of these plazas will also be expanding. Now, the plazas, is that a separate application process? If someone did, a smaller space last year and they're interested in expanding into a larger space, how would they go about doing that?
So the plaza work is kind of in its planning phases right now. We just received funding. So there's budgeting work and planning happening. There's going to be kind of some different buckets of resources that are available. Part of the funding is going to the city's events action table group, and they will be distributing that to businesses through an application process. And we'll share information with that with Healthy Business Permittees when it becomes available. Part of that is also for expanding plaza work and public-private partnership plazas. And so that will also be going out to any Healthy Business permittee who has a street closure space that is considered like a full street plaza. And then we will just work with folks. There's also, like I mentioned, some of those PBOT assets that are mapped that are PBOT owned plazas. And some of those have existing community organizations that are doing work. Like St. John's has their space, they do their farmers market and, you know, Christmas tree lighting and different events there. So we'll be reaching out to folks who engage with those spaces as well to see if there's interest in utilizing the plazas or expanding what they're doing there. So more information to come. We'll certainly be sharing it out with all of our Healthy Business permittees and then probably through Venture Portland and some other partners as well.
Excellent, excellent. Glad to hear it. Now, you mentioned that individual businesses can apply for the permits. What about business associations? If they have a space that they have in mind that might cover multiple businesses, or maybe it's just a space where there's no businesses, it's more of a kind of a public area that they'd like to transform. The business association reached out to PBOT about getting a permit for that.
Yeah, so we consider businesses to be any business at all. So whether it's a community organization or a private business or a nonprofit, anyone can apply for a Healthy Business permit for the sidewalk, street, parking spaces. And then we will go through the permitting process and permit the space. Often for the street space or use that's coming out of like a neighborhood association that wants to apply. You know, there's notification requirements as well as some sign off from adjacent properties if you're looking at a space that isn't adjacent to your operating or business operation site. But yes, they can absolutely apply. They can create community space or public plaza space and then activate that space as well.
Awesome. Awesome. Glad to hear it. If anybody has questions for Bridget, drop those in the chat. We'll get to those in just a minute, but I wanted to introduce our next guest. His name's Rob Lutz, and he's the co-owner of Stormbreaker Brewing. Hey, Rob, you there?
Hey, Jacob, how's it going?
Hey, going pretty great. Thanks so much for being here. You
thanks for having me.
Want to talk a little bit about your experience working with PBOT and the Healthy Business program and just experience building out the space for Stormbreaker?
Yeah, absolutely. So we actually have two plazas at our St. John's location and our Mississippi location on Beach Street. I think we were one of the first ones to be approved in Portland. You know, we kind of saw the writing on the wall, and when we saw what the opportunity to expand our outdoor seating, knowing that there wasn't going to be a whole lot of indoor seating, we jumped at that. Bridget has been fantastic, and everybody we worked with at PBOT has been nothing but helpful. You know, it was surprising, but so reassuring to have so many people who legitimately, you know, felt like they were on your side and really wanted to help us through what was going to be and has been a pretty difficult time.
Awesome. Yeah, it sounds like they're trying to make it as easy as possible for businesses. Now, when you were doing this, I mean, Stormbreaker already had a really great outdoor space on Mississippi, but in St. John's, it was kind of a new thing. Is there anything you learned as you were thinking about how am I going to build this space out? How am I going to make it a place where people want to spend time and are comfortable?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I had a little bit more of a construction background. I did a lot of the work myself. but really just trying to make this space as comfortable as possible so that the community felt comfortable out there. We covered as much of the spaces as we could and provided heat wherever we could safely. And definitely finding out which different rules and laws we had to abide by to make sure we're doing everything safely. But for the most part, everyone we dealt with was super willing to offer advice and help us out with whatever we needed. So if we had any questions on what we were doing, they had an answer for us.
And do you have to deal with OLCC permitting at all, since you're serving alcohol in the right of way, or is that something that is already covered by your existing permit?
Yeah, basically the OLCC said if you're approved for a plaza, we approve the permit. We had to fill out a form for it, but they basically just pushed it through. So even dealing with the OLCC was pretty great. They were just as eager to help us as PBOT.
That's great. I know sometimes dealing with multiple bureaus can be a little overwhelming. So good that they kind of gave you the go ahead on that. Is there anything that you did early on that you learned maybe wasn't such a good idea as time went on, or as the seasons changed?
Um, Not that I can think of off the top of my head. I think we were set up pretty quickly. I fortunately a lot of it was going into the summer, so I had some time to work on covering things. But for the most part, it was pretty seamless for us. Nothing too crazy. Fighting the graffiti every day has been fun, but can't complain too much.
Great, glad to hear it. And you should mention that there needs to be a 11-foot right of way in those spaces. Have you had any difficulty maintaining that, or have you had any emergency vehicles coming through, or has that mainly been something easy to manage?
Yeah, it hasn't been too difficult. We've definitely had some signs stolen by some of the people in the neighborhood, so we've had to replace signs just to make sure that everything is how it's supposed to be for the traffic control plans. That's been a bit frustrating, and we were renting street signs, not knowing that this was going to go on for years, so we spent probably more money than we needed to on renting when we should have just bought them in the beginning. So I guess that was something we learned the hard way. But other than that, no real issues. I know a couple people put their 11-foot space down the middle of their plaza and then close the whole street, where we put ours on the other side of the plaza. So you're kind of like driving down the side of the plaza, but no emergency vehicles have needed to get by as far as I know. But they could if they needed to.
Great. And my last question for you, what's next for Stormbreaker, either for, any changes to your space, or, what's just going on at your business?
Yeah, I'm hoping to have somebody help me just kind of make the space look a little bit nicer, and I got it up and functioning as quickly and as best I could, and now I'm trying to help get construction buddy of mine who's going to be without work here shortly to help me come in and maybe make it look a little bit nicer. My hope is that this continues at least in some fashion. Moving out of the pandemic, it's been so well received by the community. I do think like limiting the traffic in some of these places where people are maybe zipping through on some of these side streets is actually a really nice thing. It doesn't hinder anyone really from getting around, like they have different access. So I'm hoping to see the program continue in one way or another, because it has been tremendous for us. Without it, I don't know where we would be. We do have a huge patio at our Mississippi location, but with the rules, we would have been operating at probably about 40% capacity with nobody sitting inside, and it would have crushed us. So we were basically able to not only operate at what our 100% the capacity of our outdoor seating, but a little bit more with having the spaces on the street. And it not only helped us get through, but it helped us keep our staff employed. Pretty much kept our whole staff on once we got through the initial shutdown, and then through the winter last year, after we were open inside and then shut down again. Having that space available, people were willing to come and sit outside and bundle up. It was quite an experience, but we'd be who knows without it.
Awesome. Great to hear it. Anybody that hasn't been to Stormbreaker either on Mississippi or in St. John's, go check it out. Have a pumpkin beer, enjoy the fall weather out on the patio. That actually brings up a good question that I had. Rob was mentioning he wanted to work with somebody to help maybe make the space a little bit more inviting or a little bit more built out. Does PBOT have any recommendations on any contractors or anything that can help businesses build out their spaces so they still fit the criteria and they maybe are more accessible for everybody?
So it's been interesting. PBOT has not explicitly allowed structures in the right of way. We have allowed canopies, which is kind of a broad term, but we don't have like a standard for building these. And so no, we don't have contractors to recommend, nor do we have a standard for these particular structures that are going in a lot of the parking plazas. It's kind of a build at your own risk situation. And so I think for businesses, they're looking at like, what's the trade-off between the cost of installing it versus potentially having to pull it out in the future if PBOT says at some point, like, you can't have this. Or we create a standard with development services that says, okay, your structure has to meet whatever this build criteria is, but that's not something that we have available right now. I also will mention, I know Rob brought up a really good point about the traffic control devices, like renting versus purchasing. That's something we've heard from a lot of people. Our website, Healthy Business website, does have a link to basic traffic control devices, and that has a non-inclusive, but a short list at least of folks who rent traffic control devices in Portland. And we do recommend that you look at like, what is the rental cost versus the purchasing cost if you're planning to have these for any length of time. I've heard from a lot of people that if you're doing more than 3 or 4 months of a closure, it's worth it to purchase them. So we do recommend that folks take a look at that pricing and see what's going to be most cost effective for them.
Good to know. So businesses should be operating under the assumption that if they do put something up, it might have to come down eventually. So, feel free to get creative as long as you're kind of fitting the criteria, but know that this is still kind of a pilot program, really. And we don't quite know what's going to happen after June 30th, 2022.
Yeah, and it's structural stuff, but it's also like in the future, if we're looking at this becoming more permanent, there could be accessibility requirements as well. So that's something that you may see in the future, which is why it's so great to look at it now. Great because it's good for your neighbors, but also because the future may call for some kind of accessibility or having accessible seating. As I mentioned, some people have a combo, they have non-accessible and accessible. If you're doing parking spaces and you have a wide enough, like a 12-foot sidewalk to work with, you can maintain the pedestrian space and also have sidewalk seating. That's a great option. But yeah, it's definitely a build at your own risk kind of scenario right now.
Great. Good to know. Let's take a look at some of the questions in the chat. The first one comes from Deborah. She just asks, can you talk a little bit about insurance? We know for some businesses, insurance to cover the permitted area can be a barrier. Are there any plans to assist with that component?
Yeah, so this is something that's been flagged for us for a long time. Like even prior to the pandemic, we've always had community event permit programs, and people have had challenges getting insurance in. We know that this is an issue. We've been talking with the city attorney's office. We've been exploring kind of any option we can for insurance coverage. One of the components of that it has been particularly challenging for people, we require 2 documents, a certificate of insurance showing that you're insured, but also an additionally insured document covering the city of Portland. And so that second document, we're trying to figure out if we can just do an insurance certificate, if the city attorney's office will sign off on that. That may reduce the challenges in folks getting insurance in. It's kind of fascinating because some insurance providers are so familiar with these programs and they're just like, yeah, I'll send the documents and it's no problem. But others who are less familiar with it, we have a little bit more a little more challenges getting the appropriate documentation in, but it's something that's on our radar and that we're actively looking at and working on.
Great, thanks for clarifying that. Next question. If a business or business association wants to take over a parking spot for a day or even just a few hours for an event, would that be the same permit or is that a different permit? How do they go about doing that?
Yeah, so we did start early this summer allowing events or pop-up style events rather than more full-term healthy business permits. And so it is all being done through the Healthy Business Permit program, which is actually great because our community event program, which would normally have those permits, has some additional requirements and challenges for permittees. So this is simplifying that process, making it a little easier for communities to have these one-day or weekend events or a couple hours. But yes, you apply through the same system, and then there's a new kind of additional question space within the application that says, if you're applying for a single day event or a weekend event, please answer these questions. And there's a few additional questions that you'll fill out on the application.
That's great. And just to clarify, if a business has a private parking space, so let's say it's a strip mall with parking in front, it's not in the public right away, would they need a permit if they wanted to convert those parking spaces to an outdoor seating area?
So BDS has a program that they've been doing for private lots and private lot use. And I'm not 100% familiar with that, but I can share their website with you guys. I'll see if I can find it during this, but if not, I'll share it with you, Jacob, after, and you can send it out to folks. They do allow, of course, to convert some private parking. I think there may be requirements around maintaining ADA parking, but yeah, we can share the website for that and make sure folks can get to the right resources to know what they can do on their private space.
Great, yeah, appreciate that. And I'll be sure to include that in my follow-up email to all the attendees here. So Jeff asks, is there a map that shows which streets are not eligible? For example, side streets that might serve as emergency vehicle routes and things of that nature.
Yeah, so we have some maps through the Healthy Business website that show kind of some of the major emergency response routes. We have not been closing main streets. So our full street plazas have all been on side street locations and not down main streets. So like Lombard and Stark and some of those other main streets have not been closed, but we are doing side streets off of them, which has been a nice alternative for folks. We found that in looking at main streets, there were too many logistical concerns from other adjacent properties or people within the business district for getting their deliveries or utility services or trash pickup done. So it was hard to get consensus to close a full Main Street area, but those side streets are great. I will see if I can find that map as well and share it with you. I know they just updated it, but it'll show you the major emergency response routes and arterials and that kind of information as well.
Cool.
And then if you're interested in a side street or a full street closure, our internal review process also looks at that. So, I mean, the application takes 5 minutes. It's pretty quick. And then we will let you know fairly quickly whether or not the site that you're looking at will work or not. And we can often help you find an alternative that'll work for your space as well.
Okay. Art asks, what was the approximate cost of building the plaza? So for the plazas that PBOT was involved with, I mean, obviously these are a little bit more built out than some of the other plazas just for individual businesses. But can you share a little bit about the budget, just so businesses or districts know if that's something they might or may not be able to cover?
Yeah, I can talk about a little bit about pedestrian plaza spaces, and then maybe Rob can jump in with his cost for his side street and parking plazas as well. The public-private plazas, or the public plazas that were created, I don't know the exact dollar amounts. Like we had, $2,000 in tables, tents, chairs, those kinds of materials sent. To do a full street closure, traffic control for PBOT, if we're doing it for a BIPOC business, is around $2,800. And that includes our deployment. So we have a contractor who deploys the stuff and picks it up. And then some spaces have additional things. So paint, if you're going to paint the right-of-way space, we had a painting program through the grant, as well as a partnership with Miller Paint. So we were able to provide free paint for a lot of these healthy business spaces. We hope to do that in 2022 as well, if there's funding available. But often you'll see paint cost vary depending on what you want to do and the paint shortages, but that can be anywhere from $600 to $2,000 ish, depending on the size of the painting or how long your block is. Or if you're just doing your parking plaza versus a full street. So those are some of the costs associated with that. And then depending on how fancy you get, right? Like what kind of tables do you want to put out? Are you doing umbrellas? Are there games you want to have out for folks? Is there an activation cost if you're thinking about putting in a stage and having performers or community groups come out and use the space? So it can grow just depending on what you're planning to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. Sky's the limit as far as budget is concerned. Rob, is there anything you would like to share just specifically around Stormbreaker's outdoor space and any costs associated?
Yeah, it really kind of is up to you and what you want to do. We spent $2-3 grand to build pergolas on about a 50-foot stretch, like 50 foot by 8 feet, basically just enough to go into the parking spot and cover the tables. If you're not covering anything, you don't have that cost. But we bought heaters to put outside. We bought picnic tables. They were like $225 a piece. Wood is ridiculously expensive right now, so it costs a bit more than what you would normally spend on it. And then we bought the road closed signs versus renting them, since we were going to have it, and I think that was somewhere around $1,800. I'm not sure off the top of my head, but the investment we made in it was well worth it for what we got back.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thanks. Glad to hear that it was worth the cost. Joy asks, this is a question for Rob. What are some things you hope to do to make your spaces look nicer?
So right now we don't have, I see some of these places that have like a nice barrier kind of built around it, built up a little bit. So I kind of want to build something like that, kind of like more of like a fenced in area. We kind of just have some posts around it, kind of marking off the area. But I work 12 hours a day and I did most of the construction myself, and I'm not finding a whole lot of extra time to work on that. So I'm hoping to find somebody who can help me out with that, but just something that makes it look a little bit more inviting.
Cool. Yeah, I've definitely seen businesses use all different types of things to kind of contain the spaces. I'll show some examples in just a minute of some of those different techniques that businesses use. But Lauren asks, any advice for coordinating with TriMet? Looks like they've got a temporary bus stop relocation in a healthy business permit area. Bridget, anything to share about TriMet?
Yeah, so Lauren and I have been in connection over this for a little while, the last couple of years while Corkscrew has had their outdoor dining space. TriMet was or has been a fantastic partner for us as far as rerouting buses or creating temporary bus stops for this emergency response program and to allow businesses to utilize right-of-way space. Unfortunately, sometimes good things don't last forever. Some sites, they're able to move the temporary stop and make the temporary stop a permanent location. With this particular site, there's a lot of challenges with this space that don't make it an ideal permanent spot. So they're hoping to move back, I would say, Lauren has the contact info for TriMet. It's good to connect with them. If you are a business that has a bus stop in front of you, and you are still thinking you want some healthy business outdoor space, please reach out and apply with us. We're working in partnership with TriMet to look at these sites to see if we can reroute buses, to see if we can move bus stops temporarily to allow for these outdoor dining or retail spaces. And then, we'll let you know how that works through the process and if we need any follow-up from you directly to TriMet, but they've been a great partner for us in making these possible over the last, almost 2 years.
Good. Glad to hear that doesn't necessarily need to be a barrier if businesses kind of find themselves in that situation. So that's great information. If anybody has any other questions, feel free to drop them into the chat. We've got a little bit of time here. So the last thing I wanted to do is just share a great resource if you do have a patio. So this is the Portland Patio Guide that Travel Portland created. And you can go, if you're not on here, you can go and add your patio, clicking this link, and it'll just ask for some information around, the specifics of your patio. But this is a great resource. Travel Portland's website is so robust and built out. I think not only tourists, but also locals use it to find new and cool things to do. So this will allow you to sort by, distance from where you're at. Is it covered? Is it heated? Is it dog friendly? Does it take reservations? And they've got 267 on there now. So if you're not on here, definitely add your business at that link. And I just wanted to show you a couple examples from businesses that are on here. First one here is Dar Salaam on Alberta Street. And they've created these really awesome A-frame dining spaces, which they've kind of covered in the wintertime. They cover with that heavy, thick, clear plastic to keep elements out. But these are really cozy, intimate, and easy to build, just 2x4s and plywood that they've kind of painted to match their physical space. So I really love those. The next one comes from Parkside. If you don't want to build something and you want to have something fabricated, these are made by a local company in Kenton, whose name is escaping me right now. If anybody can remember, Figure Plant, I think they're called Figure Plant.
Yeah, Figure Plant.
These are great kind of instant, really durable spaces that you can create individual dining pods. This is from Little Beast. This is just their indoor space. I just want to remind everybody, decorate your spaces for the season. Make those inviting and get people in the spirit of the season. I think when people are in spaces that reflect what's going on, they stay longer. And this, just a little bit of garland wrapped around their lights makes it a lot cozier than just the tent itself. This is Look Lock in downtown Portland. They've got a pretty basic space, but they really dressed it up with these panels that kind of reflect the Vietnamese cuisine. So you don't necessarily need to use fencing. When you're fencing in your spaces, you can get creative and do something that fits more your brand. And then I love these livestock tubs that they've got filled with bamboo, just to create barriers between the tables and make it a little more like kind of an oasis in the middle of the city. This is a patio at Que Pasa, a Mexican restaurant in Southeast Portland. They've done a great job fencing in their space with planters. So they've got planters that they also have a roll down plastic sheeting that goes all the way around. It kind of creates a greenhouse effect and really gives you that tropical jungle feel inside. And then I love these light fixtures that they've got hanging. It's almost, it doesn't even feel like you're outside. They really make an intimate space look really, really inviting. This is Godot Godot. It's a example of a parking lot they've partially converted in front of their business. So this is something that they would go through BDS to do, but the great use of that space. They really did a good job. I love the high ceilings and the tropical tablecloths and the brightly colored furniture. Again, just kind of putting people into kind of make them feel like they're not in the city anymore. And then the last example I have here is just an example of how a mural can really enhance just basic space. So this is John's Marketplace on Powell. And you can see they've got just a basic deck with a couple of tables and chairs and umbrellas, but this mural here really brightens up the space, makes it more comfortable. So something to consider working with Regional Arts and Cultural Council if you've got some blank wall space adjacent to your patio. Okay, so that's all I had for you all. Any last minute questions, or does anybody in the audience want to share their experience working with PBOT and the Health Business Permit Program before we say goodbye? All right, well, it sounds like everybody got the information they needed. So I'm going to go ahead and send out an email follow-up with some of the resources that we talked about. And if you need anything additional, feel free to reach out to me, and I can work with Bridget to answer any questions that you might have. So thank you all so much for being here, and good luck as we head into the holiday season and the rainy season, keeping your customers happy and dry. Thanks again, Bridget. Take care.
Thank you.
And thanks, Rob, the Stormbreaker, for being here as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Jacob.